What went wrong?
Okay.
All right. This video today is going to be about why being pro-black today is just a waste of time. Um, and it's really just if you're being pro-black, in this time, you're really just making excuses for the bottom feeders that uh, you know are the loudest ones in the so-called black community. All right, and it's been like this for the last 20 some years, maybe 30 years. Um, I say that, yeah, I think we can say, in the last 20 something years. Well, things kind of got better during the Obama years. Everybody wanted to wear suits and things like that. So I guess you could say that's a time period, time period where I felt like we were getting better. So I won't say 20 years. I'll say, I'll say that it's just gotten worse in the last maybe 7 years. Yeah, I'll say that. I'll say that the forces of ignorance that want to be the face of the black community and are at this point, have been at this point, they do not want to be told what to do. You can't tell these people what to do. You can't give them any kind of construction. They always want to crash out. They always want to make a scene to get attention. They always want to be, they always want to put their feelings before consequences, you know? And this is why, when I see people, black people crying about like, oh, we don't have money, that's why, there's crime or there's nothing to do, da da da. I've been hearing that my whole life. It's always the same excuses when people want to know why, there's so much violence in the inner city communities throughout America. And people start immediately screaming about, they don't have jobs, or the kids don't have anything, they don't have anything to do to stay away from trouble, all these types of things. That's bullshit. They got summer programs for kids. They got things that you can enroll your kids in. Y'all the shitty parents don't want to do that. You got lazy ass parents who don't raise their kids. Like I've said in other videos, I've grown up because I'm not like one of these old. I'm not old, but now I'm just like in my, I'm now just getting into my 30s. So I guess to some people I might be an ancient fossil, but I'm not like somebody who's around back in the day 80s or whatever just to tell the story. But like, um, back when I was young, when I was a kid, little kid, I was growing up around people who, who clearly had bad parents. You know what I'm saying? The parents didn't teach them how to read like that. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't get away with that in my household. There's things I couldn't get away with in my household that I could clearly see, that they got away with in their household. And they had to hang out late at night. Some of them were smoking at a young age. You know what I'm saying? They used profanity, sagging their pants, you know what I'm saying? Engaging in acts that, you know what I'm saying? I just couldn't believe that people that, that young weren't even in high school yet that they were engaging in all different types of acts. You know what I'm saying? And so, when those kids grow up, they're gonna have different morals and a different mindset than someone who's growing up, um, what I'm saying, being given, you know, who understands constructive criticism, and they understand, what it means to respect authority. You know what I'm saying? You have to have these things instilled in you so that you can come up and be a proper adult who can function in society. That's the main difference that's going on out here between, the aspects of the black community that are lower bottom feeder, and the aspects of the black community, black people who don't want to behave that way and want to do better in life, and They don't want to crash out over stupid stuff. They don't think it's funny to, what I'm saying, yeah, to get into beefs. And they don't, take thrill in, what I'm saying, going to jail. They don't take thrills and twerking on cars. They don't get thrills in acting like buffoons in public. What I'm saying? You have two different types of people out here. What I'm saying? And people trying to keep, and if black people do this, and other groups of people do this. They don't want to see the difference between the two, and people keep talking as if there's one way of thinking among black people, and we have to realize that the this long ago being a fork in the road, and the black people who want to behave like lower income niggas, they've gone down their road. They have gone down their road and made their decision. Y'all gotta stop trying to argue with these people. You know what I'm saying? The people that Chris Rock was going at like 30 years ago in his special, they have long, they did that, they were doing that then. You know what I'm saying? Acting like niggas back then. They have gone down that path. You know what I'm saying? In their world, what matters to them is getting food stamps or scamming or, you know what I'm saying? The things that people see as stereotypically black. That's their road they want to go down there. They want to have raw sex. They want to pop out kids. They don't give a fuck about getting married. They don't care about, what I'm saying, having too many tattoos. They don't care about being loud, too loud in public. These are not the things that concern these types of people. You know what I'm saying? They are all the way down with ignorance. So they're down. They've gone down that fork, or they've gone down that road. The fork, the fork in the road is we've gone past that road. You know what I'm saying? And so they've gone down that way. And you have some people that's on this part of have gone down with them because they're a bunch of panderers. You know what I'm saying? They're not really about that life, being raggedy and all that, but they want to use that behavior because they want to make excuses for that behavior, and they're always the type that's always, like, this is, this is just, they're just a product there of the environment, or you shouldn't judge, or you're just being anti-black. You can never, with these types of people, they're always making excuses for, the ratchet behavior. They're always giving an out for these types of people, and always trying to make it seem like, you're a bigot, or something wrong with you for not being okay with ghetto behavior, and just letting them just slide. Those people, um, they might have to come to a fork in the road. They might have to. Some of them might have to split up. At a certain point in the road, at a certain point in the road that they've gone down. Are they going to keep pandering to these degenerates and making excuses for them to the point of no return, or are they going to get out and be like, look, black community has been doing this for too long, and we gotta turn around and get this do what we can to get back to, decency. And that's on them. They're on their road. They have to prepare the ghetto element, man. They gotta go over there and prepare that low income element and try to talk to them. The rest of black people that know how to behave, you shouldn't be feeling like you're indebted to these people. You know what I'm saying? You don't owe these people anything because of their behavior. They have made a choice in their lives to behave, uncouth and be disrespectful and to go out and carry themselves in the lowest way possible. That does not have anything to do with the rest of black people who know how to behave. I don't know, and I don't know what percentage of black people are decent black people versus the ones who don't know how to go out and be civilized and whatnot. But I know that um, there are black people who are now vocalizing how they're tired of these types of niggas. Literally, like they're tired of these types of niggas who can't go outside and just behave themselves and just always find themselves, acting a fool and being an embarrassment. And I feel that, you know, uh, uh, we gotta You gotta realize that, like I said before, those types of people, it's on deaf ears. They're gonna go out here and they're gonna go out in public and act stupid. But what we need to do is to have a way to vocalize how we're not accepting that behavior in public. You know what I'm saying? If you see a bunch of niggas acting crazy in a spot that doesn't require them acting that way, we should be able to be like, hey, what I'm saying, you can't do that here. You're not gonna go twerking on a table at this restaurant because this is not your restaurant. What I'm saying? Go down to the fucking to the place with a bunch of gunshots in it and go act like that over there. You know what I'm saying? Do not come over here to well-meaning establishments bringing your stank behavior. That's how it's got to be. And you got to hold down these restaurants, and everybody has to pitch in. If you see niggas fighting at spots they shouldn't be at, you should be like, yo, you should let the establishments know, like, nah, I don't agree with this behavior. I don't like what they're doing. They don't represent, respectable behavior. You know what I'm saying? I don't. Hey, we should be, you know, we should feel like we should make it. Put our foot down and let everyone know that, hey, like, we are not okay with this behavior. And maybe even this, we could just do with making videos. Like, let's say, a bunch of niggas go to a spot that's not a ratchet spot, and they go in and tear it up and fight and throw chairs and destroy everything. You could define ways to help that business out. It's respectable people, and let it be known, like, hey, hey, we don't condone this behavior. You know what I'm saying? Don't, you know, those types of niggas, they're those types of niggas. You know what I'm saying? And you know, or let them know, like, hey, we're the respectable black people. Respectable black people don't want to see that type of stuff happening in these spots. And if you see those types of black people coming in, and you want to create a dress code or whatever to keep them out, we're cool with that. There's nothing anti-black about that. Businesses should not feel like they're being anti-black by calling out these types of niggas. And they should not have to deal with panderers who make excuses for these types of people not behaving right in public. You know what I'm saying? And these types of people should be called out on the regular. They should not feel comfortable in public, especially outside of the what some people call the rat community. They should not feel comfortable leaving hood areas and going into where everyone else is at, acting the way they act. Everyone should always immediately call the police on them and get them out of the establishments. Now to think about it, yeah, don't argue with them unless you got the numbers on them or whatnot. You got security. Don't argue with them because they have nothing to lose. These people have nothing to lose. They That's why they crash out. They got nothing going on in life. They're pretending to have money, to impress other bum ass niggas and shit like that. You know what I'm saying? They're out here spending all their money, that they do have on designer shit and, you know, uh, pills or whatever the fuck, face tattoos. You can't you can't rationalize with people like that. All right, they're living backwards. All right, they're living in a backwards reality. If you got to deal with it by getting the whole security, police, and getting them people out of that establishment. Like I said, no, people should not be afraid to get up, to not want that behavior around them. You shouldn't have to be uh, faced with that type. You shouldn't have to be faced with ignorant behavior, especially if you're paying to be in nice areas. You know what I'm saying? Uh, People work hard in life, and you go through enough bullshit to then have to deal with people who weren't raised right, coming in up in your face and bringing their ignorance around you, making making a scene and looking for attention, doing stupid shit. You ain't got time for that. You know what I'm saying? So all this, in the end of the day, um, yeah, everyone's now tired. Everyone's vocalizing how they're tired of niggas, man. And black people have been, some black people have been saying that for a long time. But then you have like I said, you have panderers in the black community who constantly do things to give passes to people who do ignorant things and always making excuses for negative behavior, which is why this stuff is growing, has been growing for decades. These ignorant types of people always want or feel comfortable because they know they're going to get a pass for their behavior. And this is why in any major black city you go to, there's so much degenerate behavior. Right? There's a ton of degenerate behavior to go around in any major black city in the United States because uh, these elements feel that they are imposing because they live where people aren't going to say anything about what they're doing. That's what goes on. People are not going to say anything about you know people out here acting a certain way. Fighting in public and fighting in areas where people are and going out, wearing hoodies and all types of crazy uh, wintertime outfits in the summertime. They're not going to say anything about that. They're not going to say anything about, motherfuckers getting on the train and smoking where regular people are on the train smoking. Or where motherfuckers Jews getting on the train smoking blunts or whatever, where, people sitting down, um, not trying to deal with all that. Bringing that type of, BS on the train. What I'm saying? People are not trying to deal with these types of behaviors and regular people aren't trying to deal with these areas in their areas, but they feel kind of scared to say anything because there's pandering going on, and I feel like the hood rats and stuff like that are going to be angry at them and they call them racist if they're white or insult them if they're a a non-black person. They'll come at them sideways, or if they're black, they'll call you a coon or whatever. Uncle Tom, whatever the fuck. And it's bullshit. You shouldn't have to feel like um you're some type of bigot for dealing with these trash behavior people who carry trash behavior around with them. But this is where we're at. They get to be cool because they don't know how to act right because they have this like uh, ghetto attitude that they carry with them. So now everybody needs to like move out their way. You know. So and then you have people who are not even from the ghetto that wanna fake carry this type of behavior out too. So now you got motherfuckers going out here and carrying on, acting buffoonish in areas where it should be too. You think that this type of behavior would be priced out? So you got that going on too. So it's like like what do you do about this behavior? I say that's why it's kind of good that people talking about rap music dying. That's where a lot of this is just being you know uh, that's what feeds a lot of this behavior. People think it's cool to be ignorant and act like some of these rappers. I think that's a real way of making it, and it's not. These are entertainers. They do these things for a check. You know what I'm saying? They do these things to get clicks, to make y'all bozos in the ghetto think this is how you're supposed to behave. And like I said, there's different productive black people all the way over here. They're on a different. They're going down a different highway to a different destination. These low life, ghetto-minded people, they're going down a different highway. They're going down the crash out highway, so you need to leave them alone. I'm saying let the authority, you know, of course you gotta, like I said, my whole point of this is to call these people out and let y'all know don't be afraid to call them out. What I'm saying? If you have something to lose, you got these people make irritating you and all that, and your job and all that. Hey, you gotta, I guess you gotta make your voice known and find other people that can, create a community around it and find a way to come up with a solution. Because you shouldn't have to deal with that, whether you're white, black, or whatever. You shouldn't have to deal with annoying ghetto ass people. I feel like that's one of the most irritating things about just life now. Um, that you gotta it's like tolerate. people who are not tolerable. You got to tolerate all types of you know, you know low impulsive people. You got to deal with all types of low information people, and you got to be the one to constantly have the upper. You got to behave like you got the upper hand. You got to behave like you got the you got the you're more behaved. You got to behave. What am I saying? You got to behave like you know you're the well behaved one with something to lose. That's something better. But whatever. You got to be the one to behave. That's my point. And it's bullshit, man. It's bullshit. Bogus and bullshit, man. It's it's a damn shame that we have to feel like we have to tolerate this. But now I feel like conversations are changing because we're having conversations, many times that we're too scared to have. But now people are kind of seeing like, hey, I'm kind of tired of this behavior. Like, why do we tolerate this type of behavior? Why do we have to tolerate people yelling and acting stupid in public? Why do we have to tolerate motherfuckers who want to fight strangers in public? Or I want to act stupid in public transportation? Why do we have to tolerate? Why do we have to allow people to, you know, why do we say nothing about people doing certain types of behavior? Just like we just got to call it out instead of turning the other eye and acting like it's normal. Call it out, and society, the sky will get brighter. That's what I believe will happen. And let me know what you think about how you feel. The black community is there is there a point of return? Should black people waste their time or spend their time trying to help these other ghetto minded you know blacks out and help them get their shit together so they can be productive? Or are you like me? You think they'll hell no? Like, this is a waste of time. Like, I already know how these niggas get down. They're not gonna change. They're all about doing nigga shit. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, they live the stereotypical nigga life, make excuses about everything, and their mindset is just not gonna be changed. At a certain age, you are who you are, and a leopard can't really change his stripes like that. It is what it is. You know what I'm saying? Niggas gonna be niggas, like they say, and you have to just stay away from them, or they're gonna take you to Nickerville with them. And I'm not about to work hard in my life to be taken uh, to Nickerville and have to deal with that type of stuff. Because hell no. So if y'all agree, let me know what y'all think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. I'm out. It's your boy Solo Omi.